Good. All right. All right. So for those that are just kind of rolling in, if you want to put your name, organization, or who you represent today in the chat, we'll go ahead and get started. People may trickle in as we get going, and I'll do my best to try to keep an eye on that in the chat. There should be questions at the end. If you want to write them down and save them for the end, or you're always welcome to raise your hand or come off chat. I'll do my best to keep an eye on that. We are recording this today, just so we can share it with our SNAP partners that were not able to join us this morning. So we're going to go ahead and get started. For those of you who are kind of new to these, I do try to have these every quarter. Participation is kind of all over the place, but I really do appreciate all of you who do take time out of your busy schedules to learn about SNAP. Many of you are either partner agencies with the food bank or are kind of a non-partner agency, but still a partner with us in some way. Um, and SNAP might be a part of the work that you do at your organization. So it's really important to me that you all are aware of the current happenings in the SNAP program. I don't expect everyone to be an expert in SNAP, but that's why we're here, is so that we can brief you all on all the things that are going on with the program. So the part one of two, we just went over the SNAP eligibility basics. So if you missed that, I didn't record that one, but I'm always happy to do a one-on-one with you or your team. So that was part one where we just kind of went over the core basics of SNAP eligibility. And today we're going to talk about eligibility for special categories. And as if you're aware of SNAP and you're kind of working within the SNAP world, you know that there's a lot of pieces and a lot of things that go into being eligible for SNAP. So we're going to talk about kind of those, pull out those special categories and talk about those for a bit today. Um, Next slide here. Perfect. Before we jump into all of that, I do want to just kind of set the stage and go over just a recap a little bit about the basic core eligibility factors for SNAP. But first, SNAP is vital. If you don't know that, you should. It is the largest nutrition assistance program in the country. It's part of our safety net. So when the needs of Americans are not being met, we have these federal safety nets and community safety nets. So SNAP is one of those federal safety net programs. It is super effective to ending food insecurity. It is for every one meal that a food bank can provide, SNAP provides nine. It gives people the choice and dignity to search for or to grocery shop just like anyone else. Going to a food pantry and getting a food box is great and sometimes very needed, but SNAP gives people the dignity to go to the grocery store and buy the foods that that they want and that are relevant to them. So for every $1 of SNAP benefits spent, $1.50 to $1.70 is generated back into your local economy where those dollars are being spent. So a lot of people that don't know a lot about SNAP will say that it is a drain on the economy, but it is actually investing dollars back into those local grocery stores. It's helping to keep those people that work at the grocery stores employed. There's a really, there's a lot of cool scientific, if you're a numbers person, there's lots of data out there that will show you how all that trickles down to benefit the local economy. When people are not spending their SNAP dollars at the grocery stores in the community, I think that's when people will start getting worried. When big name grocery stores start losing out on their dollars. Earned income employment is the second most common income source upon SNAP recipients. Another thing people will say, a lot of people that don't know anything about SNAP will say that only unemployed people participate in SNAP, but that's not true. We see that when people can work, they do work. And they can still be eligible for SNAP as long as their, income is not over the threshold, and we'll talk about that in a second. But earned income is the second most common income source. All of these data points here are coming from the USDA, so if you don't believe me, you're always welcome to check that out on your own. In fiscal year 2023, an average of 42 million people participated in SNAP program, and that's about 12% of the US population. In Tennessee alone, in 2023, 71% of Tennesseans were, sorry, 21%, 71% of Tennessee SNAP participants were in families with children. Over 35% were in families with members who are older adults, so seniors, or disabled. And more than 37% are in working families, so someone in the household is receiving money from a job. All right, so in case you missed the last engagement that we had, again, we have these every quarter. The last one, we went over these core eligibility factors. So I'm just going to do a quick refresher of those, and then we'll jump into today's topic of special categories. But if you didn't know, the core eligibility pieces for SNAP, so not anyone can just say, I want to get SNAP and be handed an EBT card. It doesn't work like that. You do have to qualify for the program. Anybody can submit an application, and if they're not eligible, they won't get penalized or anything. They'll just get a denial letter that says you're not eligible. But it's a waste of time for everyone involved to apply for SNAP when you're not eligible. When in doubt, definitely do still apply, but it's important to help people not waste their time with sending in the documents and applying if they're not even going to be eligible to begin with. So the first thing you'll want to decide is if you're an application assister or you are helping a community member apply for SNAP, you'll want to know how many people live in the household. And of those people, how many of them are buying and preparing meals together. So an easy example would be if you have two parents, two children, come to you and they ask for your help with seeing if they're eligible for SNAP, the first question you would ask is how many people live in your household? Four? Okay. Do you all buy and prepare your meals together? If the answer is yes, then all four of those household members will be on the application. Any income or resources attached to those four people are going to be considered in determining eligibility. Even if it's a child that's getting survivor benefits, right? That income is still counted. So all the total income of all the people in the household is counted. Now, if it's a roommate situation or maybe a non-traditional situation where you have people living under one roof, but they're all buying and preparing meals separately, we do see that a lot in today's day and age. It's expensive to live on your own. So people have roommates, multi-generational households living under one roof, or families living under one roof. So you'll want to ask this question of the people in your household, do you buy and prepare meals together? And that's going to help you determine how many people are actually in the household. And that will give you the question of those people, what is your gross income? So that's the next thing you'll want to look at is any gross income of any household member. And that is income before taxes and deductions. So that is kind of that top number you get on your paycheck before they take out anything. And any income, when I say income, everybody's mind goes to employment, but there's lots of things that are considered income when it comes to SNAP eligibility. It's unemployment, disability, workers' comp. Sometimes if you're on maternity leave and you're getting a maternity leave pay, that is considered income. Social Security benefits, SSI, which is supplemental security income. Cash assistance from programs like Families First or TANF. If you are getting survivor benefits, pension, all of that is considered income. Net income is also considered when looking at SNAP eligibility. So household income after allowable taxes, after allowable deductions and expenses. So that's that bottom number on your paycheck, the money that actually goes into your pocket. And then resources. So any liquid assets, and what liquid assets means money in the bank. or money that is easily accessible to you. So, not a house, right? A house would not be considered a liquid asset because that is a little more involved. You can't just go to the bank and say, give me the money that my house is worth. It doesn't work like that. And same with like a motorcycle or an RV. Those are not considered liquid assets. So cars, motorcycles, RVs, boats, those are not considered assets for SNAP. And if you have clients or neighbors that you're working with that say they were denied because they have a car, that to me is an indication of a Department of Human Services eligibility worker who is unaware of the SNAP rules. You were probably kind of scratching your head like, well, they work there, they should know. And the fact of the matter is that, there's a high turnover rate at DHS. They're constantly hiring new caseworkers. And unfortunately, that involves little to no training sometimes. So we do have to be aware of that when we're working with people. If they're getting wrongfully denied for a mistake on DHS's end, there are ways to fight that, such as an appeal. And there are organizations that are great, like Tennessee Justice Center, that help with SNAP appeals. So if you ever have anybody coming to you where you do think it looks like a legit wrongful denial, where something was counted when it shouldn't have been, I always recommend reaching out to Tennessee Justice Center. They help with the appeals paperwork. Citizenship status also comes into play. We're going to talk about that in a bit. Um, so here's the income chart for SNAP. It changes once a year, every year on October 1st. Once we have the new income chart, I will send that out to all SNAP partners, probably via the MailChimps that I send out to you. If you got this invite, it's probably because you're on the MailChimp mailing list. But if you got it from a friend or a coworker and you want to be added to the MailChimp newsletters that I send out every month, please let me know, and I can get you added. But the income chart for SNAP is you can find it online, but it's not easy to find. So I would recommend if you want it, let me know and I'll send it to you. I just don't want you using the wrong income chart and then getting confused or having people get confused. Because there's lots of different programs out there that have eligibility or income guidelines that are different. So it's just important to use this one. For SNAP, you have to be at or below 130% of the federal poverty level. And you don't have to really, we don't have to dive into what that means, but these are the income, the gross income based on household size. So if that family of four that we mentioned earlier, you would need to determine that all the income coming into the household is at or below this amount here, the 3,380. And if it is, then they also have to pass the net income test. So a lot of people don't know this, but you have to pass both the gross and the net income limits in order to qualify for SNAP. Assuming you pass the gross and the net income limit, you also have to pass the resource test. So it's a means tested program, SNAP is. And what that means is you just have to pass the income test and the resource test. And we'll talk about the resource limits in a second. But if you are a senior, if you're 60 years or older, or you are receiving disability benefits, you are only subject to the net. So not the gross and the net, just the net. Everyone else, though, is subject to both gross and net. There are certain deductions and expenses that you would look at to determine if the household's income gets below the net. Not every expense in life is counted for the purpose of SNAP. So life insurance, car insurance, things like that are not actually counted. So you need to kind of pay attention to what those countable expenses are, and determine if those minus your gross income get you below the net. I think that's all I will say here. It is important to use the language of likely qualify or not likely qualify. If you have somebody coming to you asking for your help in determining if they're eligible for SNAP, maybe they want to apply, but they don't want to waste their time if they're not going to be eligible. So if you help them with determining that, I would never tell someone you're going to be eligible for SNAP and here's what you're going to get per month. Or I would never even say you're not eligible for SNAP. I would just be careful and kind of use the language of you may be eligible for SNAP based on the information you've told me, or you may not be eligible for SNAP. So just be careful with that language and then make sure that you give the neighbor the choice to decide if they want to apply or not. The only people that can determine if you are eligible for SNAP are DHS eligibility social work caseworkers. So we can help people kind of determine if they might be eligible, but we can never say for certain. It's going to all be up to the Department of Human Services. Um, yeah, we'll move on to the resource limits here, but the resources that are accountable, I think I touched on this earlier. It's not cars, it's not RVs, but it is checking and saving accounts. It is cash on hand. If you have a Venmo or Cash App account, if you have CDs, stocks, bonds, which are not so common these days, or if you have a lump sum payment, typically in a bank account, those types of things. All households have to have resources that do not exceed $3,000. So in addition to meeting the income qualifications, they must have their resources must not exceed 3,000. For household members that are seniors, 60 plus or receiving disability benefits, the resource limit's 4,500. And we are not going to talk about, I think I failed to mention, but we're not going to talk about the expenses for SNAP. That was part one of the quarterly engagement of core SNAP eligibility. So if you missed that, get with me and we can talk about that. But today we're going to focus on special categories in SNAP. And what I mean when I say special categories is over the years, the USDA has created so many policies for different groups of people. Those groups of people might be students, adults without dependents, and immigrants. So we're going to start with immigrants, and we're going to talk about who is eligible for SNAP and who is not if they are an immigrant. I do want you to kind of listen to me first before reading through this slide. There's a lot of information on this slide, and things are ever changing. So let's cover first who qualifies as an immigrant. So any child under 18 who was born in the United States, regardless of their parents' legal status, can be eligible for SNAP. Any adult 18 years plus, so any adult who immigrated to the United States and has legal permanent residency, also known as a green card, and has had that status for 5 years, can also be eligible for SNAP. Any child who's not a U.S. citizen but has green card status can be eligible for SNAP without that 5-year waiting period. And then naturalized citizens. So, a note about any of these folks that fall within these categories. For the example of a child in the household, let's say it's a household of four and there are two children that are United States citizens and the parents are not. The four of them are going to be on the SNAP application. And the parents, even though they're not going to be eligible for SNAP, their income is still going to be considered. So all four people will go on the application, parents' income will be listed. And then if they are eligible, if all four of them, like let's say the income does not exceed the limits, the resources do not exceed the resource limits, households eligible, DHS is only going to base the benefit amount on the two children, since they are technically the only eligible people in the household. I hope that makes sense, but even if they are not themselves eligible for SNAP, they do need to go on the application. Okay, so yeah, I already touched on this first little asterisk here. All immigrants or non-citizens still must meet the standard eligibility guidelines for SNAP. So the income and the resources, of course, still apply to any of the groups we're going to talk about today. Folks that are not eligible for SNAP. Immigrants with work visas, student visas, or temporary travel visas are not going to be eligible for SNAP, never have been. Adults with legal permanent residency or green card holder that has had that status for less than 5 years are not going to be eligible for SNAP. And then any undocumented immigrants are not eligible for SNAP and never have been. Now, these three here, these three bullet points here that have two asterisks next to each of them, these categories used to be eligible for SNAP. And right now, due to the passing of the One Big Beautiful Bill on July 4th, there were some changes to a lot of different things in that bill, but some of those affected the SNAP program. And one of the biggest pieces was the immigrant eligibility and work requirements, which we will talk about on the next slide, I believe. But for immigrant eligibility, so refugees and asylees used to be eligible for SNAP,
My camera's
and
off.
they are no longer eligible for SNAP. Um, we do not know how the
Thank you,
USDA
love you, girl.
rolling this out. We do not have official word from USDA on how they're going to determine what immigrants, what refugees are already on SNAP and how they're going to take those benefits away. We don't know yet. Cuban and Haitian entrants under the Refugee Education Assistance Act used to be eligible for SNAP, and it is unclear if they are now going to be eligible for SNAP or not. The reason I say it's unclear is because if you've been um, keeping an eye on the news since February or January, you might know that there's a lot of things in limbo right now with who can come into the country and who can't. So a lot of refugees who have been waiting 10 years to come into the country, they may no longer have that kind of grandfathered in approval. So there's a lot of definitions changing. Cuban and Haitian entrants under the Refugee Education Assistance Act, they're likely going to change the definition of the Refugee Education Assistance Act. So it's just unclear right now if Cuban and Haitian entrants are going to be eligible for SNAP. Um, Special immigrant visas. So most commonly, these are folks that were authorized by the United States to migrate to the United States, oftentimes based on their military affiliation. So Afghani nationals who immigrated here because they were granted to do so because they assisted the United States in a war. Maybe they were translators for the military. So people with that kind of visa status used to be eligible for SNAP, and right now it is unclear if they will be, because again, these definitions are being changed. And there are conversations happening about who can get what and who falls under what category. So just know that right now, technically, these three categories are not likely going to be eligible for SNAP anymore, but we are awaiting further guidance. People under the not eligible status here, they've never been eligible for SNAP, so that's not any change, but that's just so you know. If you wanted to go find out more information, I thought I put this in this morning because I was just going to look for an update on the USDA website. And when you go to the SNAP eligibility page for non-citizens, this is the message you get. So you're not even able to see what was eligible, who was eligible before and who wasn't. They've completely taken the page down. So as probably are looking to us for answers, we're in the same boat you are. We're waiting for USDA to change their guidance and their definitions and who's eligible and who's not. So if you do work with immigrants who are receiving SNAP already, I wouldn't raise the alarm just yet because again, I don't know, are they just going to fall off of SNAP? Are they going to get a letter that says in 3 months your benefits will be terminated? I don't know. So we will just have to see what happens. If you are seeing letters like that, or you're hearing from immigrants that are getting letters like that, please let me know. I'd love to see that, an example of that happening, because I have not heard anything yet, but I imagine at some point we will. I think that slide was supposed to be after this, so we're going to jump back to here. That's all I have to say about immigrant eligibility today. If you have questions, feel free to save them for the end. Now we're going to talk about folks with felony convictions. If you have a Class A felony, drug felony, you are fully banned from receiving SNAP. It's always been that way. No felony conviction stuff has changed as a result of the One Big Beautiful Bill. Really, the only things that have come from that are the immigrant eligibility and the work requirements, which is on a couple more slides. So this stuff on this slide has always been the case. Not everyone knows if they have a Class A felony, but pretty much what SNAP looks at is drug felons. They don't necessarily look at people that have felonies because of murder or anything like that. It's just drug-related felonies. So if you are in the household, let's say one of the parents in the household of four, there's two children, two adults, one of the adults has a felony, a Class A, so they're not going to be eligible for SNAP. However, if they're all buying and preparing meals together, that person still needs to go on the application. Their income is still going to be considered. But when they're determining benefit amounts, they'll only base it on the people that are actually eligible. They'll remove the person with the Class A drug felony. They'll remove them in their kind of calculation as a eligible member. So if it's four people, all four of their incomes considered, but when it comes to being approved and benefit amounts, only three people are going to get the actual benefit, if that makes sense. If people have Class B through A drug felonies, Class A is obviously the most not violent because it's not a violent crime, but it's the most serious, I guess. It's large quantities of controlled drug substances either being sold, um, distributed, or used. That's kind of, I don't know the language exactly. You can look up Class A drug felony definition if you'd like, but it is the most serious of the classes. Class B through A drug felons can still participate in SNAP, but there's a barrier added for them. They are going to apply just like everyone else, and they're going to likely be asked to show proof that they participated in a drug treatment program, or they are on a wait list for a drug treatment program. Or in some cases, if you have a Class B through E drug felony, maybe you were not a user of drugs, but maybe you sold them. So in that case, maybe your terms of your probation or your sentence was you didn't necessarily need treatment. So if that's the case, everybody's case is different, but if that is the case, they would need a letter from a treating provider, attesting that a drug treatment program was not needed or recommended as a part of their charges. A lot of people will get calls from, there is a question on the application that asks about drug felonies. And people are somewhat hesitant to answer that. I'll have some people say, yeah, I do, but it's from like it's like from 1984. And I'll say, well, it doesn't matter because it doesn't. It doesn't matter if it was 2 years ago or 20, 50 years ago. It still shows on your record and it is still considered when we're talking about eligibility for SNAP. So a lot of people will say, well, I don't know, how I'm going to get my drug treatment letter that shows that I went to treatment back in the 90s because that place isn't around anymore. Very valid. And what I usually will tell them is they just need to ask DHS when it comes time for them when DHS asks for that documentation, they need to speak up and say, look, I did treatment back in the 90s. I didn't keep that letter, or I don't even know how to contact that organization, or that organization doesn't exist. Can you help me get that documentation? DHS should be able to look in the system. They have a whole slew of records they can pull on people. They have access to all kinds of databases. So they should be able to see some kind of court documentation that shows what they need. DHS is not going to go do that on their own unless the person speaks up and says, "Hey, I need you to help me get this." And they should be able to look that up for the person. All right, moving on to students. So students are put into kind of a special category for SNAP. The definition of student, as defined by USDA, is students that are attending an institution of higher education, like a college, university, trade school, or technical school, more than half time. A school will determine if it what's considered half-time enrollment, but I do believe it's usually like 6 credit hours or more is half-time. But again, it depends on the kind of school and the school. But students that fall within this category or that meet this definition may be eligible for SNAP only if they meet an exemption. And they, of course, have to meet all the other eligibility requirements like income and resource test. They have to pass those, of course. But the exemptions, so if you are um, under the age of 18 or over the age of 50, you are exempt from the work requirement. And what I mean by like exemptions, what are we exempting from? It's the work requirement. And we are going to talk about that in a few slides. If you are a student that is physically or mentally disabled or unfit for work per the USDA's definition, then you are exempt from the work requirement. Now, I would argue that if you are a student and you're pursuing your undergrad or master's degree or any degree really, I would consider that to be work. But Department of Human Services and the USDA do not. So if you are a student doing studies for some kind of certificate or degree, then you also have to work 20 hours a week or more. So you have to be a student and work at least part-time unless you meet one of these exemptions. So I hope that makes sense. If you're working 20 hours a week or more and you're a student, great. Then you are doing what they've asked you to do. If you participate in a federal work study program, that satisfies the work requirement. So you don't have to do 20 hours a week of employment plus the work study. It's just either or. If you're a student and a parent or caretaker of a child under the age of 6, you're exempt from the work requirement. Um, and then if you receive TANF or you're a single parent enrolled full-time and taking care of a child under 12, then you're exempt also from that work requirement. And then if you can prove, if you are a student and a parent or caretaker of a child on age 6 to 11, don't ask me where they come up with these age ranges, and lack and can show that you lack necessary childcare that enables you to attend school and work and take care of your children, then you can also be exempt from the work requirement. Additionally, if you're a student, maybe you're getting a meal plan. So if you get a meal through a meal plan for the majority of your meals, you are not going to be eligible for SNAP. Even if your income and resources are under the limits, it doesn't matter. You can't get both SNAP and have a meal plan. Students are probably one of the largest groups of people that are eligible for SNAP but not participating. I think a lot of it is they know this stuff and they don't want to fool with it. They know that they can't meet the work requirement. Or maybe they've tried in the past and maybe they were receiving SNAP and got kicked off. So it's really unfortunate. We would love to do some college or university outreach to try to bring awareness to SNAP and help college students apply. So if you are connected to any local colleges, trade schools, universities, let us know. Um, we would love to talk to those students that might be food insecure. All right, seniors and individuals with disabilities. So seniors for the purpose of SNAP is anyone 60 plus, so 60 years of age or older. Disabled individuals. So when I say disabled, I mean they are receiving disability benefits. So it's not just self-reported. People that are disabled and are in the process of signing up or signing up for disability, that can take years, long time for people to get approved for disability. So if they're in that waiting period, a lot of people fall through the cracks. So if they are disabled and they truly cannot work, but maybe they're just waiting on their disability benefits to come, or be approved, then that can be tricky to prove to SNAP. You might have to get a letter from the treating provider who can attest to your disability and say, use kind of the language that says you're unable to work. That's what SNAP's looking for when you say that you have a disability. But anyway, seniors and folks with disabilities, they can deduct medical expenses that they pay for out of pocket from their income. So a lot of seniors, if you work with them, you might hear that they got approved for SNAP and it's only $20 or $23 a month, and that's not worth it to them. But what they didn't know is if they have out-of-pocket medical expenses, prescription costs, over-the-counter meds, doctor visit copays, maybe they have to pay for transportation to get to and from their doctor appointment. Maybe they pay out of pocket for insulin or the test strips if they have diabetes. So, yeah, all those things count. And if they can show that they have paid those or have those expenses and they have receipts or documentation to show that, they can get those deducted from their income, and that is going to automatically increase their benefit amount. So if you have seniors that are on SNAP right now and don't know this, let them know at their next recertification, when it's time to recertify their benefits, they can go ahead and submit those receipts at that time, and that's going to change their benefit amount. So anything over 35 is deducted. So if they have like $10 a month that they spend on prescription copays, that's not going to be deducted. But if they have, let's say their expenses total out to $135. So you would just take 100 minus 35 and get 65. So 65 is the amount that would be deducted. So it's any dollar amount over 35. So if their medical expenses are 40 a month, they actually only get the $5 deduction. So that's how that works. But I mean, I would encourage them to really think hard about what their medical expenses are because there's a huge, long, like 5-page document that lists all the things that can be considered medical expenses for the purpose of SNAP. So as long as they can have receipts, or get receipts. They can just submit those if they're applying for the first time. Just have them submit those documents or receipts with their application. If it's time for them to recertify and they want to start claiming those medical expenses, just have them submit those at the time of recertification. Yeah, and then I just listed what some of those might be. If they pay out of pocket for a caregiver, that counts too. So a lot of insurance plans don't cover home care. So I know my great grandmother, her whole life savings was spent on a nurse to come take care of her in her own home. So that is costly, and those expenses can be deducted. Okay, let's talk about probably one of the most common categories for SNAP and those special rules for them. So you may have heard this definition. It's a USDA definition. It's called ABAWDS, or able-bodied adult without dependents, is what that acronym stands for. The government loves acronyms. An ABAWD is any person aged 18 to 54 years old. I put an asterisk there because that age range has changed. Due to the One Big Beautiful Bill, that age range is now going to be 18 to 64. So if you are aged 18 to 64, you need to satisfy the work requirement to receive your SNAP benefits for more than 3 months in a 3-year period. So let me stop there and just use a quick example. If I'm a 30-year-old and I do not meet any of these work requirement exemptions, then I could apply for SNAP, assuming my income and my resources do not exceed the limits. I get approved. I'll get my EBT card in the mail, and then I'll start using it. And probably around the month two mark, I'm going to get a letter from DHS that says, if you would like to keep your SNAP benefits further, you need to start sending us proof that you are working and satisfying the work requirement. If you do not submit proof by this time, XYZ date, then those benefits will terminate and stop. So you can get 3 months of SNAP, and then after that 3 months, if you're not submitting proof that you're working, they're going to turn off your benefits until you can supply that proof. What are the work requirements? So it's 80 hours a month, which equates to about 20 hours a week. Work can be be for, your traditional employment. It can be self-employment. If you're selling, stuff on Etsy, you have your own business. It can be volunteer work, so unpaid work, or it can be participating in a work training program. You may have heard those called like SNAP Employment and Training or SNAP E&T. You can find a list of those on DHS's website, but those are training programs where you don't necessarily get paid. You get a certificate at the end that is supposed to help you go into the workforce and have transferable skills that you gain from that. So any of those things would satisfy the work requirement. Lots of great organizations, even like our own, that loves volunteers. So if you have someone that is unable to find work or can't work for whatever reason and needs to satisfy this requirement, they can always volunteer here, any of our 3 warehouses, and that will satisfy that. DHS will look for documentation. So, of course, if you're working, it would be pay stubs. But if it's volunteering, you would need to have a letter from the organization that they're volunteering from that lists out how many hours a week or how many hours a month that person volunteers there. And it needs to be signed by whoever's kind of in charge of that volunteer shift. People can be exempt from this work requirement if any of the following apply. So if they're pregnant, if they are unable to work due to a physical or mental disability, we talked about that earlier. It's if you are receiving disability benefits, or if you're in limbo and trying to get disability benefits, you need to have some kind of proof from a doctor that says that you're not able to work. If someone is in the household under the age of 18, I should have put an asterisk here, here, and here. Veterans, people experiencing homelessness, and people aging out of foster care are no longer exempt from the work requirement due to the One Big Beautiful Bill passing. So that is something that is changing. And then I needed to change. I apologize. This is not correct. Have someone under 18 in the household. That's changing due to the One Big Beautiful Bill. That means parents of children aged 14 to 18. So if you have a child under 14, you're exempt. But if you have child in the home 14 to 18 years old, you still need to satisfy the work requirement. So I apologize. I'll send these slides out, but I'll change that before I do. So again, veterans, folks experiencing homelessness, those aging out of foster care, and parents of children 14 to 18 are all now going to be required to satisfy the work requirement. And then, of course, now if you're aged 18 to 64. So those are the big changes. We, again, with just like the immigrant eligibility changes, we don't know yet how this is going to roll out. We are waiting on the implementation guidelines from USDA. I don't know if this means like people aged 63 who were on SNAP are going to start getting letters that say, hey, you need to start working now. I don't know what that's going to look like. I imagine that's what it's going to do. I imagine DHS will have to build some kind of trigger system in their records that will look at every person on SNAP and their age, and it will somehow have to trigger a letter that sends to them. It's going to be an enormous administrative burden on our Department of Human Services office to start rolling out these changes. Keep that in mind as you're helping people apply for SNAP. I'm already seeing my team as we help people with applications. The wait times are back up uh, to the uh, to the 2 week mark. So let's just keep that in mind. And as much as, I think a lot of people say, oh, DHS is the enemy, I really don't think that. I think they're doing what USDA tells them to do, and they have to build the systems with the limited funds they have to start rolling out these changes. So I really do kind of sympathize with them, and I think they're kind of in the same boat a lot of us are. Like they learn of these things at the same time we do, and then they're told to implement them. So I do want to give them grace, but we also need to make sure that we're letting people know that there's probably going to be slower processing times for applications coming in. At the same time, DHS is at a staffing crisis where they are not fully staffed. So that is an ongoing battle as well. Okay, I think this is one of the last, yep, categories, but I get this question a lot, and so I wanted to talk about it. There are no specific age limits to receive SNAP. So I think that kind of catches a lot of people by surprise, but they really don't care. They want to know who lives together and who's buying and preparing meals together. Like that's their big thing. So if you are 17 and you've been, removed from your household or you left your household, I get this a lot actually. We get a lot of calls from minors who are homeless, and they are applying on their own and they're not living with any parents, then they can be eligible for SNAP. So they don't need to be 18 or 21, nothing like that. They can apply for SNAP as long as their income and resources meet the eligibility criteria, but they have to be living on their own. So they can't be living with their parents. I get a lot of calls from, you know, 21-year-olds who live with their parents, 18-year-olds who live with their parents. In those situations, they would have to include their parents on the application if they're living with their parents. Um, so those would be considered, households. So parents and their children 21 years old or younger living together are considered a household and they must all apply together. But any minor who lives on their own out of the household of their parents or caretakers, then they can apply. All right. Now we have about 10 minutes for questions, and then before you hop off, we have the trivia question, which whoever is closest to answering it correctly will get a $10 gift certificate. I think I have Target, Amazon, maybe a couple others, so we'll get to that in a second. But are there any questions? Do not feel scared to ask them.
Just a quick question for you. How do you handle when grandparents have grandkids that they're raising and need to apply for food stamps for the grandchildren
Yeah.
and the grandparents' income may be over the income?
Yeah, actually, that happens a lot. So, unfortunately, if the grandparents and the children buy and prepare meals together, those grandparents' income is going to be considered. So, unfortunately, if the grandparents' income is over the income limit, then they are not going to be eligible for SNAP. No one is going to be eligible for SNAP. So, unfortunately, that is a large group of people that miss out on SNAP. Um, but they have to pass that income test. So even if they just say, oh, well, I just want SNAP for my grandkids, it doesn't matter. If they're buying and preparing meals together with the children, for the children, then they would have to go on the application and their income would be considered. Hope that answers your question. If they don't qualify for SNAP, though, and I'll say this across the board, if you're working with anyone who doesn't qualify for SNAP, there's other resources. So I mentioned earlier there's community safety nets. So even when our federal safety net fails us, there are community supports. And hello, I work at the food bank. That's who we are. So we partner with 46 counties. Some of you that are partner agencies of ours are on the call. And all those partner agencies have either a meal program or a food pantry where people can come and get food. Typically, there are no income qualifications to receiving food from a food pantry. Sometimes there are if there's like government commodity food items that they have, but a lot of the times they'll have other foods that are not attached to a federal program. So I have a handy dandy, or we have, not I, but we have a Second Harvest midtn.org on our website, a find food tool. I think when you type in our website, you go to it's the first page, it's the first thing that pops up. And if you click that, it's going to take you to the find food page. You can type in your zip code or your address, and it's going to, and then you click search, and then it's going to show you a list and also a map of those food pantries closest to that address or zip code, and the phone number and the address and the name of the organization. So a lot of the food pantries we partner with are churches, community-based nonprofits. So that's a great resource to give people when they don't qualify for SNAP. Because there are still those community supports. So let's, as much as food banks rely on people utilizing SNAP, right? We can't fix the food insecurity problem ourselves. As much as, we would love for people's needs to be met by SNAP, we understand that that's not the reality. So definitely check that out. I'll drop our website in the chat. I think there is another question in the chat as well. Is the 3 month and 3 year rule for ABAWDS only? Yes. As far as I know, yes. That is a work requirement, time limit, whatever you want to call it, rule for the ABAWD category. Okay, well, if we don't have any more questions, get ready to type it in the chat. So I haven't figured out how to do Zoom polls yet. I'll figure that out at some point. But until then, the way that we're going to do these like trivia questions is you're just going to type your answer, one answer only, in the chat, and I'll only acknowledge the first answer. So if you pick an answer and then you do a Google search and get a second answer, I'm going to only acknowledge the first question or the first answer. So, trivia question is, and again, you're doing this to win a gift card, $10. How many people in Second Harvest, 46 county service area are food insecure? If you can just type your answer in the chat, whoever is closest to the answer is going to win the gift card, and there will be plenty more of these, plenty more opportunities to win a gift card, I promise. And if you're just coming into the meeting today, you won't be eligible to receive this. Unfortunately, you do have to participate in the engagement. Okay, so how many people in Second Harvest 46 county service area are food insecure? And this is a number I'm looking for, not a percentage. Sorry. So I know it's a guess. That's why it's trivia. Um, so 46 county service area here in Middle Tennessee. How many of the people in that area are food insecure? And just type your answer in the chat. We'll give it till the end, and then I will show you the answer, and whoever was closest to that is going to win that gift card. And whoever answers it first. So if two people answer the same thing, whoever I'm trying to figure out the poll thing. I don't know if that's more fair, but we'll get that maybe next time. Okay, I see 1 mil, 90,000 to 500,000. Keep them coming. Okay. Let's see. Is that everyone in the call that answered? Right. If there's anyone else that wants to give this a shot, I think we have one more person that needs to answer. So whoever is closest to it and whoever guessed it first will win the gift card. Okay. Let me give you another minute. I think there's one other person, and if not, we'll go ahead and reveal the answer. All right. And the answer is 445,380 individuals. So that is actually an increase from last fiscal year. So this number came from Feeding America. So we had, I think it's about a 40, I'm either getting it wrong, 16 or 40. We have a lot of talking points with percentages and I get them mixed up, but it is an increase of food insecure individuals since last year in our service area. So 443, sorry, 445,380. I believe the person that guessed closest to that and first was Elizabeth. So I'm going to email you to coordinate getting you that gift card, Visa gift card. I think I have a Visa, or I might have Target, Chick-fil-A, Amazon, a couple others maybe. So I'll get with you and we'll work out getting that to you. Congratulations, and I appreciate all of you for joining and participating. Part three we'll have next quarter. So we do have these every quarter. I'll send out the invites for those as we for that as we get closer to time. I was